Hello everyone, no have name I want here, otherwise known as Patrick. And in this episode, this video, I'm just going to talk about my season 2 wish list for all the factions and items and all that. Essentially, these are changes that I would personally would like to see. So this is everything here is my opinion, but I will give detailed explanations as to why I think the way I do. Some scenarios of like why is this too strong, too weak, yada yada yada. I'm gonna go through first Arengard, then Gath, Sylvan, then the items and all that. So first off, let's just start with the heroes. For all the for Tristan and Aurelia, I really don't have much. The only thing I would want for Tristan is a kind of rework for Divine Favor. Simply put, Divine Favor is pretty much just the shields, the item shields, and that's basically all it is. Sure, it doesn't take up an item slot, but the only way Divine Favor is worth taking is if, one, Tristan has 3 item slots. He has all 3 of his item slots fully taken up, and so the shield, he can't equip a shield. One of them is not a shield. He has 3 items, one of them is not a shield. And 2, he needs more health. So, in addition to having 3 item slots, one of them not already being a shield, and he would also need more health. That's the only real reason I can see you wanting to take Divine Favor. His other 3 abilities, I think, are pretty good in a good spot. Braveheart's just a nice passive. Arrest is incredibly strong. It's not oppressive in any way, but I think it's still pretty strong for a hero card. And same goes with Shield Bash. It's strong, but it's not like super annoying or overpowered. So I would personally like to see Divine Favor have a rework. And the rework I think would work is maybe he can give shields to other units, or maybe he gains shields over, like he can spend mana to gain shields, like a pseudo health regen or something. Or maybe it's a different thing. It doesn't have to be shields. Maybe it's a different thing. But I would like to see Divine Favor have a rework in some shape or form. Otherwise, I think Tristan's in a great spot. Before, without Steadfast, he was pretty weak. Now, with Steadfast, he's an incredibly solid hero. And I think he's in an incredibly good spot, other than Divine Favor. Aurelia. For Aurelia, I think she's also in a pretty good spot. I don't really know what I would change for her, because changing her stats in any way would be pretty big. But I personally think Aurelia right now is the one of, if not the best heroes in the game. For simple reasons, like she has everything. She can do literally everything, and she can do it well. She has a good mage build with Sunstrike, good aggressive charging build with Sun's Fervor. Glory's pretty lackluster, but I think there's a build for that somewhere. And Solar Aegis is probably one of the strongest abilities in the game. So I don't know exactly what I would do for Aurelia, but I think either reducing her mana to 4 might help her, because obviously that's a big nerf. 5 to 4, because that's a whole extra mana. That's one less ability, but that would mean she has to be more careful in how she uses abilities. She can't just use abilities willy nilly and still have plenty for the rest of the game. But I think the change I would want is maybe giving Aurelia 4 health. Because if you consider both the Tristan and Aurelia, Tristan's supposed to be the tank. He's got 6 health, he's got steadfast. He's supposed to be the really big, beefy guy. And Aurelia has 1 less health. Don't get me wrong, steadfast is strong and that really increases Tristan's health. But Aurelia does pretty much have everything going for her. I think just having a small nerf, making her just a bit less durable, would be nice. Meaning you might have to give her a shield or an extra item like Worm Scale or something. And that's what I would want Aurelia. And Glory, I mean, I'm not sure. I've never really seen Glory. I think most people go for a Sunsphere or Solar Aegis, or just a pure Sunstrike build. I don't really see a lot of people going for a Glory build, but I can see Glory being fine as is. I just don't see it a whole lot, but yeah, I think Aurelia could lose a stat in either her mana or her health. So she's not just a master at literally every build. If she had less health, then she's at least a bit more squishy and easier to deal with. Because if she's this good at all these things, I think she should be just a bit squishier. But I think Aurelia's also in a good spot. If she doesn't get changed, I wouldn't mind either. And then all the units. For Squire, I think Squire's alright as is, but there has been talk of a universal nerf to all the really cheap units. I think just because there was an oversight of how efficient they were for their gold cost. So I think most of them are just being universally nerfed. I think Squire, if he had to be changed, I think he's fine as is, because sure he has good stats for 2 gold, but not really gonna do anything. He just gets beat by literally everything, pretty much. He's pretty much like a counter to the 2 golds, but so I think that's fine. But if you were gonna change him, I would either reduce his power or his movement by 1 or something. It does seem weird that a Squire is the same speed as a Knight, so I would prefer the movement by 1, but again, I think he's fine as is. But if he had to be changed, I would do either the power or movement, but I'm more keen on the movement. Apprentice Wizard. I think Apprentice Wizard is low-key pretty busted just because of Diminish. Diminish is essentially the exact opposite of a Tactician buff. Tactician can give +1 power. Apprentice Wizard gives -1 power, and that's incredibly strong. He also has a range, so he can just hit things and not take any damage back. He's imbue, which means he can hit damage knights and all that. So I'm not entirely sure what I would change. I think I would rather have Diminish be until the end of your next turn. Like, the target enemy unit has -1 power until the end of your next turn. That way it's temporary and not a permanent debuff. Because if you look at Lackey, his +1 power is temporary. So I can see Apprentice Wizards Diminish being temporary with something, but that's what I would change if Apprentice Wizard, if he had to be changed. Spellcradle Seraph. I think Spellcradle Seraph is completely fine as is. I wouldn't change her at all. She's good in certain builds, but she's not extremely oppressive. Unlike Tactician, she actually has a mana cost. so she can't buff everything forever. And the amount of units she does buff is way more limited than Tactician, so I think Spell Kiddo Seraph's perfectly fine as is. Shield Bearer. Again, Shield Bearer is strong, but I don't think he's incredibly busted. I think he's fine as is. I think if anything, I would reduce the range of Protect by 1. Just because you can't just put him in the corner and start affecting these X's. You have to sacrifice some of these drafting spots to put him next to units you actually want to buff. But I think he's fine as is. But if I had to change something, I would be Protect 2 range. Longbow Archer. I think he's perfectly fine as is. I don't see any problem with him. He is a good unit, but he's not broken or anything. He's just a solid average unit in my opinion. I wouldn't change him at all. Crossbowman. There's a lot of things that Crossbowman can be changed. You can either increase his gold cost or something, but essentially what's wrong with Crossbowman, I shouldn't have deleted this, but essentially what I find wrong with Crossbowman is, bring Tactician because I know I'm going to need him, is he's pretty much impossible to efficiently trade with once he gets any sort of buff. If a shield bearer gives him a shield, he's now got 3 health. So now the only things that can actually trade with him are units that are double his cost. Everything else he can beat in a fight. And if you have a Tactician, same thing. All of a sudden he starts beating units that should be countering him. Like the Small Hunter. If you have a Tactician, you can give it +1 power and all of a sudden he's beating the Small Hunter. Or even like the Hatchling, you give the Crossbowman a shield, and all of a sudden Hatchling can't kill it. A Flanker, you give him like +1 range, and all of a sudden he just snipes the Flanker before he even gets a chance to kill the Crossbowman. So I think the problem with the Crossbowman is that any sort of buff on him suddenly makes him incredibly busted and just not fun to go against. So there's a couple changes you could do. One is you could remove this passive he gets, where he gets an extra power against exhausted units, and give him armor. Just give him like armor 1, because Arengard's known for armor. They're the only faction with natural armor, other than I guess like Centaur. But giving him armor would make him more of an aggressive archer, being able to move up to the enemy and charge like with your knights and everything, still being kind of beefy. But then all the stat changes he would get wouldn't be incredibly busted, because he's not doing 2 power at 4 range or 3 power at 3 range and all that sort of thing. So I think if anything, his passive needs to be removed and just replaced with something else, because as of right now this passive is incredibly broken on a 3 gold unit, because any buff suddenly makes Crossbowman so cost efficient that it literally gets like triple its gold value like a game. Tempest Mage. Well, let's keep these. Tempest Mage. I think Tempest Mage is completely fine. I wouldn't change anything about him. I think all of his abilities are strong but not broken, considering they aren't combinable. So I just don't see a change for him. I think he's perfect as he is. Tactician. I have a whole list of things I changed for Tactician. One, why I think, well, first let me list all the things I think is wrong with Tactician. 1, he's far too cheap. For a 4 gold unit, he does so much more than every other unit in the entire game, in my opinion. Uh, he has +1 to like every single stat in the entire game. He can even give pathing if he really wants to. It doesn't matter if he's easy to kill because you can easily protect him with like literally any of Arengard's units because you just buff the unit to kill the thing that's threatening Tactician. Just like if you just look at Longbow Archer, because I don't know why I deleted them. Like Longbow Archer, all of a sudden you have like a 4 range unit and he can suddenly start chipping at the enemy round 1. Or if they push up, now you can buff Longbow Archer. Now he's doing 2 damage. You essentially just got a Longbow Archer. Or an elite Longbow Archer. So +1 range and +1 power is incredibly busted. Crossbowman, +1 range and +1 power is incredibly busted for a unit that cheap. For the Knights, and this goes for all the Knights, +1 power, +1 speed, all of them are incredibly busted. For units like Spellbreaker, all of a sudden, +1 range, +1 power. Now it makes Spellbreaker incredibly busted. Like Tactician makes all these average units that I wouldn't change into incredibly overpowered units that are so super cost efficient. And all of this is a 4 gold unit. And what really sucks is that you can just have 2 or 3 and then you can literally have buff literally your entire board. Like if you just have these 2 unit like Tacticians here, you buff your entire board. You can target every single hex in your board for 2 Tacticians. And if you're the opposing team, how do you play against this? If I have a full board and I can buff all of them, you have to play around so much shit. Sorry for my language, but you have to play around so much shit that it's impossible to play around everything. Their opponent's gonna find some way to abuse turn 1 or round 1. Like as of right now, the meta. I don't like talking about the meta, but I feel like I should if I'm talking about this. As of right now, for Arengard, the meta is really just sit back, turn round 1, wait for you to hang a unit or fuck up, and then they'll buff the units, and then they'll get a free kill. And then they'll have a Reliant to Solar Aegis if shit goes wrong. But this is essentially Arengard's plan. You just have 2 or 3 Tacticians, and just buff their stuff, and wait for you to fuck up and kill you. And if you don't fuck up, well, they'll still kill you, and then they'll just Solar Aegis the unit that went in, so it doesn't die. So, Tactician, and also, just keep in mind, he doesn't have a mana cost, so he can do this till round 7. He can do this 7 times, and just never run out of resources. He's incredibly broken in that way, too. He targets more things. He has much stronger buffs than Seraph, in my opinion. He has unlimited uses. He's way too, like, so many things about it. So, the things I would want from Tactician is first, my first thing is reduce the range to 1. That way, instead of targeting literally everything in your deployment zone, you can only target these 3 hexes. So you actually have to plan what you put next to Tactician to abuse it. Then your opponent can be like, okay, these are the 3 things my opponent can do. These are the 3 units my opponent can buff, and I can play around it accordingly. If he moves this unit, it's like, okay, well now these are the units that he can buff. So you can plan ahead. The other thing is, I really think he should have a resource cost. It doesn't have to be mana, but you if you have a buff this strong, you have to limit it in some way, I think. Because having unlimited uses of a Tactician buff is incredibly oppressive. Because even if you have just 2 shitty units, Tactician can buff him up and kill, and super impossible to kill units sometimes. I've had games where I was winning. I had a cave troll full health, but it didn't matter because my opponent would just tactician buff a longbow archer, and I would slowly lose that cave troll, and I just couldn't hold the middle because the longbow archer would just slowly kill me. So, also, just one last thing. I know everyone's gonna think, "Oh, I'm talking about tactician for too long," but I firmly believe Arengard's whole strategy relies specifically on tactician. If you don't have tactician in your list, your list is literally like 10 times worse than if you did have tactician. I firmly believe, okay, you put this on record. I firmly believe you cannot have a competitive Arengard list without a tactician. You need at least one tactician to have a competitive Arengard list. Without it, then you can do it if you want to, but if you want a competitive Arengard list, you need at least one tactician, preferably two tacticians in these spots. But I just firmly believe tactician is this busted. I think tactician by himself is boosting Arengard's power as a whole. Like, if Arengard didn't have tactician, I think they would be like 2 whole notches weaker. As they go from S tier to like B tier, in all honesty. That's how strong I think tactician is. So again, if I were to change him, I would reduce the range of tactics by 1, give him a resource cost, or you can even like increase his gold cost or something. I don't know. But you can even remove one of his buffs. There's so many things you could do to Tactician, and he would still be incredibly strong. Tactician, I think he's fine. I wouldn't change anything about him. I think he's underrated anyway. People think he's bad. I think he's incredibly good. Swordsman. Honestly, I just reduce his gold cost to 4. Put him in the same gold cost as a grunt. I don't see why not. I don't see reason why he can't be 4 gold. Sure, he'd be the same price as a pikeman, but pikeman has steadfast, and they could see a reason why you'd want either or. I don't know. Priest. I think Priest is fine as is. People think he's too strong. I don't think so. I think he's perfectly fine as is. Sure, the Dispel being able to heal is incredibly strong. If I were to change anything about him, I would make it so that the heal happens first. You heal a unit for 1 and then remove a debuff, because then that, like for like Gath, the anti-heal, that would actually do something. But I would, if anything, I would swap that. But I think Priest is fine as is. Enforcer, I think Enforcer is fine as is. I wouldn't change anything about him. Pegasus, I think Pegasus is fine as is. I wouldn't change anything about him. If I were to change anything, I guess I would be, he can't get buffed by Tactician, but that's about it. Halberdier, I think Halberdier is fine. I wouldn't change anything about him. Leech Longbow Archer, I think he's perfectly fine. I wouldn't change anything about him. Spellbreaker. If I had to change something about Spellbreaker, I would make his cast ranges 1 less. He's an incredibly good unit just with his stats by himself. You can even like reduce the range, if anything, but I think he's strong. But if anything, I would either reduce his range of his abilities by 1, so from 4 to 3, or I would remove his range value, because he has a glaive. Like, he shouldn't have a range anyway. I don't know why he has a range, but he even if you just change the cast range or remove the range, I still think he'd be incredibly strong. He's supposed to be a tech card anyway. He shouldn't be incredibly good. But I mean, if you remove the range, he's a 3/4. So he's kind of like a swordsman. but he's got magic resist and some abilities, so I think he'd still be good. And for the cast range, like he's beefy enough already. He can afford to walk closer to the enemy. Elite Swordsman, I wouldn't change him. I think he's pretty good as is. No, I don't think he's too strong or too weak. Tempest Mage, Adept Tempest Mage, I think he's fine too. I wouldn't change him. Knights, I think Knights are fine. I think the main issue with Knights is like any sort of buff makes them incredibly broken. Healing them, Tactician buff, like Aurelia, whatever it is. If you buff a Knight, all of a sudden they go from like good but not oppressive to incredibly oppressive. So I wouldn't know how to change Knight. I think I wouldn't change Knight, but I think like some the support cards could be a notch down. For High Priest, I would increase the health to like 2. If you compare him to Priest, sure he does heal for twice as much, but usually you don't want to heal for that much anyway. Usually if you have to heal that much, the unit's probably going to die before you can heal him. But he's too high risk, high reward. I think he could easily have 2 health and be fine. Just a little extra protection for the amount of gold you're putting in. I think that's perfectly fine. Frost Maiden, I would kind of do the same. Like, increase the health to like 2. Not entirely sure, but you'd even like give her another ability, but then she has 3 abilities. I don't know how you'd fit that, but I think she could gain health or have a shield on her or something. I don't know, but I think she could just start with 1 extra health, like the High Priest, because you're putting in a lot of money on her. I think she could just be a bit more survivable. Royal Griffin, I think he's pretty fine as is. He has 2 actions, so you can do a lot with 2 actions, so I think he's fine as is. Paladin, I think he's fine as is too. I don't think anything about him's too broken. Same can go for Angel. I think he's fine as is. I don't think he's too broken. Battering Ram, I think Battering Ram is fine as is. I don't think he's too broken. For the Heavy Knight, same thing goes for Knight. I think he's fine. It's just buffs on him make him incredibly busted. But that's a support thing and not a Knight thing, so I wouldn't change Knight. For Catapult, there's a couple things I'd change for Catapult. First, I would change is give it like Armor 1. It is a siege weapon, so it should be pretty hard to kill baseline. So Armor 1 would make it pretty beefy. And you put in, this is a 12 gold archer, essentially. It should be pretty, and the theme about the catapult anyway is supposed to be it's hard to kill. It has 4 health. So I think giving it armor 1 wouldn't make it incredibly busted, considering the damage output you get for 12 gold isn't incredible. Heavy Knight is probably just going to be doing better things than a catapult can. I would also, you can also make it so that it ignores evasion and armor or something like that. So there's actually a big reason you'd want to take catapult. Is if there's taking a bunch of evasion or something, then catapult can actually hit them pretty fine. But I think if anything, I would give it extra. I'd give it some armor so that it's just hard to kill, and you're not super sad. For Ultra Knight, I think Ultra Knight's fine as is. Again, the only thing that makes him busted is once you give him buffs. But I think it's a support problem, not a Knight problem. I think Ultra Knight's fine as is. I wouldn't change him. Grand Wizard. Honestly, I would remove. You can't use his ability in the first round on teleport. I can kind of see a reason why they did it, and that it prevents turn 1 Jesus, but this is a 15 gold unit. You're investing a lot of resources into doing this. The opponent can kind of stop it with like a root or something, disarming, whatever. Like I can see them being able to stop it. So I think if anything, I would change teleport. I would also get rid of diminish for a different ability. I really don't like Grand Wizard having diminish. Like teleport and arcane blast are really cool and fun, but diminish is it's just like a small apprentice wizard's debuff. But I don't like it. I change it. And then for Archangel, I think Archangel's fine. I wouldn't change it. So those are my like wish list. That's like my wish list for Arengard for season 2. Again, these are all my opinions. You can yell at me in the comments below, but again, this is just what I want. Some suggestions I would give. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.